Welcome again. We're in week 2 of this series called Winning the War in Your Mind. And this series is a lot about what goes on in our heads, our thinking. And in addition to thinking, sometimes we got worrying or stress, anxiety. And we also have sometimes false ideas in our heads. We're talking about all those things. Last week we began, it was sort of a foundational message. I'm going to be building on it as we go through the series. But we talked about the importance of what we think about. Maybe you've not really considered, is it important what I think about? Is it important, do I need any discipline of where I let my mind go? We're going to talk about that. I want to do a quick review of last week, because I am going to be building on it. So some of the things we talked about last week, one was that most of life's battles are won or lost in your mind. Usually our actions, before we do them, start out as something we're thinking about. So it's very, very true. We also talked about how our lives are always moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. So if you're thinking about a lot of negative things, or you're complaining and griping in your head and you're all stressed out, that's going to affect the direction that you're moving, if those are your strongest thoughts. And we also said that the life we have is a reflection of the thoughts we think. So if we're struggling with your life, maybe a good place to begin is let's consider what we're spending our time thinking about, what we're focusing on. And I believe that's more than just the big ideas. I think it's a day-to-day thing. It can be in the little things. It's not just, well, man, I need a new job, or I'm deciding whether I should get married. It's not just the big things. It's the simple day-to-day things that can just drag us down. And we talked a lot about how some of our thinking is wrong, and yet we think it a lot. And so many of us have these tapes we play over and over in our head. A lot of the time is based on things that happened to us when we were younger. And we, repeat the lies. We repeat the negativity towards ourselves. And so the one of the other things that we shared about is you can't have a positive life when you have a negative mind. And so this is a really key thing. It affects us all, and it can really affect our life, our future, and our relationship with God. So so last week, one of the key things I talked about was these strongholds that we called them. Basically, areas of thinking that are so ingrained in us that we think them all the time, and they're not true. And so we ended the message last week. We said, well, let's see if we can name our biggest stronghold. What's the kind of wrong thinking in my mind that just attacks me the most? Is it, I'm just not good enough, or, I'm alone, I'm lonely, no one loves me, I'm always going to be alone, or something good happened, that means something bad's got to happen next, it's waiting for the other shoe to drop. These kind of false thinkings. And so I said, identify what you think your strongest one is, the one that, the false way of thinking, the wrong way of thinking that's dragging you down. And then we ended with, then name the truth that demolishes it. We're going to, that this comes from some stuff we were studying in 1 Corinthians. Basically, God's truth demolishes these strongholds. And so how can we know the truth and make that present in our mind so that these negative thoughts don't rule us? Because the strongholds are lies. And so we ended last week saying, let's figure out, and if you don't know one, I shared you kind of mine. It's like from 2 Peter. But I said, if you don't know it, search for it. Google is a great tool. But it's a lot of this sprang from Romans 12:2, which we shared last week, which says, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So this is about changing, renewing, fixing the wrong things in our minds. It says, then things are going to be going good. It says, then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So we're trying to find what truth we can combat these negative thoughts, these strongholds in our mind. So today I want to build on that. Our title today is Taking Your Mind Back. So how do we do that? And one thing I've found is it generally doesn't do good to say, well, I'm going to avoid thinking negative. I don't want to think negative. It's like trying to work in a vacuum. It's like, try and not think about something bad or something that's terrible that's happened to you. Well, immediately you start thinking about that. So we don't want to not do it. So the way to fix it is to start thinking of other things. And so the focus today on taking back our mind is going to be, what can we focus our mind on to combat this? So that's where we're going. What we think about really directs our life and affects our future. And so we're going to need to adjust our thinking, change some things. So a key part of this series is I'm asking you to alter or start new habits and change some things. Those are the things we hate the most, right? I don't want to change, and I like doing things the way I'm doing them, but this is going to require us to say, I have to do some things a little bit differently. We need the truth of God to be the most dominant thing in our thinking to combat these strongholds. And so for us to take our minds back, what we're talking about today, from these lies of these strongholds, we've got to be transformed by the renewing of our minds with truth. And so for truth to renew our minds, we have to change what we think about, change what we focus on. So today's message is building on last week, but we're going a little bit further, and I want to introduce kind of a way to deprogram or reprogram your mind, change your thinking, so that we can undo the stronghold that it's programmed our mind to be negative or think that we're no good or whatever our problem is. So most of us, the wrong thinking that plays over and over in our minds, it's been going for a long time, probably years, maybe for some of us decades. And so for us to renew our minds and sort of allow God's truth to reprogram us, it's going to take some repetition. It's going to take a little time. We're not going to say it once, learn a Bible verse, and like that fixed everything. It's going to have to be a concentrated focus. So last week I shared with you my stronghold is the negative part of me is this idea that I can't ever be good enough. And it goes all the way back to my childhood. With my dad, who loved me but tried to motivate me by showing me all the things I did wrong so that I could improve them. And back in the day, we thought that was a good idea. Now we've discovered that all it does is make you feel like you're wrong all the time. You're never good enough. So that's my thing. And, because no matter what I do, no matter how good it is, we live in the real world, and you can always find something that you could have done better, right? And that's kind of my thing I deal with. And so it's been a struggle for me, even though rationally I know the truth. This stronghold still stuck in my head. And so, I've read the Bible, and I know that those ideas are false, and I know even the truth that combats it. But I know that God has given me everything I need to be his child and to do whatever he calls me to do. I know that truth is from the Bible. So what I want to focus on is I'm going to do my best, trust God with the rest. That's kind of where I'm coming from. I shared from 2 Peter 1:3 last week. That was kind of one of the verses that helps me with that. But the reason we call them strongholds is because they have a stronghold on our mind. Basically, the word is like a military fortress with heavy walls. It's this area that's not going to be easily taken down. And so it's going to take more than just knowing the verse exists or I've read it. Right? It's going to take a concentrated change. We need to hear it and think it and repeat it a bunch of times so we can overcome the strongholds. And so basically I'm talking about training your mind, training your thinking. And see, I think one of our favorite things to do is just let our mind wander. What do I want to think about? What's coming up? And so what I'm suggesting we're going to have to take a little more control over that. Develop some mental discipline with our thoughts. You may never have thought about training your mind or disciplining your mind. The good news is training, well, maybe it's bad news. The good news is training your mind is a lot like training your body. And some of you are like, well, then I'm in trouble, right? Because that's a struggle too, right, to do the physical training. But the good news is there's a methodology that we can grasp a hold of. So when you go to train your body, you start with exercise usually, or at least activity, right? If you really haven't done anything for a long time, you just start with activity. I'm going to walk, I'm going to not sit on the couch all day. And then sometimes it can go beyond that to exercise. You know, for me, my physical discipline is riding my bicycle. This is a great time. Summer, I have a short riding season. It's about 3-4 months. And then the rest of it in Pennsylvania, you can't ride outside. Or you have to do it in the middle of the day when I'm working. But anyway, so the good weather now, I ride outside. I love, sometimes I'll do a Saturday ride. I'll just take my bike and go ride a trail. But usually I do it early in the morning. I feel like it's my neighborhood. No one else is around. I got to watch we got a terrible rabbit problem. I almost take out 3 rabbits every ride. Like they're just everywhere. But they're quick, thankfully. But so, I mean, I love it. I can just have the peace. I have the coolness of the morning. I mean, even with the heat of summer, sometimes I'm cold. It's wonderful. And so I ride this regular course in my neighborhood. And, you know, I usually time myself to see, am I getting faster, stronger, or worse? And, you know, if the weather's bad and when the season ends, then I ride a bike inside, which doesn't motivate me as much, but just as good exercise. But we all know when it comes to physical training, physical fitness, it's not just the exercise, right? That's part of it. One of the most important things besides exercise is what you eat, what you put into your body. So what do you eat? How much do you eat? What are your portions and how often? And, I'm married to a vegetarian, so that helps me. I eat a lot of vegetables. And I try and control my serving sizes. Now, my real weakness is chips. Now, it used to be it was cookies. My first 45, 50 years, I never met a cookie I didn't like. I love cookies. Somehow my taste has changed. I probably have maybe 2 cookies a year now. I'm not exaggerating, but my taste has shifted. Now I love the chips. I love the savory. So now I've got that struggle. And so what I put in and how much I eat is the struggle. I can exercise all I want. If I eat all day, it sort of counteracts it. Now, the reason I say that is because when it comes to discipline and training the mind, it's very similar. I know how important it is. I've got to think on the right things, try and avoid the negative stuff, keeping my thoughts focused on the good things. But I don't want to feed my mind the wrong things, right? Just like I don't want to feed my body the wrong thing. Now, one of my weaknesses is I just absolutely love true crime shows. And I don't know why it is. I've tried to analyze myself. Is it because it's like it shows the true reality of what people are doing out there? Because, you'd think, oh, these terrible stories of someone poisoned their spouse and they did all this. You'd think there'd be rare stories. No, they got 1,000 of them. It happens all the time, and I think, what's going on? So I'm fascinated. Now, the problem is when I watch this stuff, the focus is sort of negative. It's all on the worst behavior of people. And Karen can't stand it. She's like, oh, I can't. She doesn't like the crime shows, and I just love them. But I do know that what I put into my mind is going to affect what my mind is going to do. And so I have to be careful with that. But it's really important if we want to have a life where we walk with God, where we're not overcome by these wrong thinkings in our mind. And we've got to think about what we're thinking about. We've got to focus it. And so, we're going to be looking at what I think are some of the most positive, encouraging verse in the whole Bible. This is one of my favorites. This is from Philippians 4:8. I'm sure you've probably heard this before. It says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Right? Isn't that great? If there's something true, focus on that. Noble, right, all these things. Powerful. This is probably the best wisdom you're going to get all day today. It's right, Philippians 4:8. Like, that is such a great thing. Let's shift our focus on things that are good, things that are right, things that are praiseworthy. Can we train our minds to do that? We live in a negative world. If there's some interesting news, whether it's on social media or it's usually negative, something that went wrong, a tragedy, more people are suffering from the heat or there's flooding here. Like, it's always negative. And so it's hard to do that. So I was really excited. I'm I was listening to the news, and it was one of these Philippians 4:8 stories. I'm like, look at that. So probably most of you know about the guy who escaped from the Warren County jail in western Pennsylvania. So this guy, he escaped, and he was on the lam for 9 days. And, it was interesting because it's right here in Pennsylvania. It made national news. And this guy's sort of a survivalist. He's like this guy, like, just put him out in the woods, and he's going to make it on his own. So, like, how are we going to find this guy? And so you know what happened? Tucker the dog caught him. About 4 or 5 miles outside of Warren. This guy hadn't made it very far. And this guy's dog, Tucker, just starts barking like crazy. They have a big place, so it's probably like 100 yards away to the tree line. He's just barking, barking, barking. He never does that, barking, barking. So they got in their golf cart, his people, and they went down there, and up pops this guy. What are you doing? He says, I'm camping. And he recognized him, and they called 911, got the guy arrested. He's busted. And to me, the best part of it is Tucker got a $2,000 reward, the dog. And so his owner said, he's eating steak. So I'm like, to me, like, that's something noble. That's something praiseworthy. Like, if we could just find these things in life and think on them instead of thinking, oh man, the economy's going down, inflation, prices are going up, right? Because, it's going to go up, and we need to be aware of it, but let's not focus our thoughts on those things. It's so easy for the bad to take over. We want to focus our thoughts on God's truth, on God's power, His love, and His grace. Actually want to meditate on God's stronghold, breaking the truth. So that's all of that to finally get to point number 1, which is meditate on God's truth and goodness. Meditate on God's truth and goodness. Now, the word meditate or meditation can have some kind of mixed connotations in meetings. When we hear meditation, we think of sitting in like a really pretzel-like position for a long time or chanting. And that is one way that some people do it. But actually, meditation just literally means to engage in a mental exercise and to focus one's thoughts. If you're meditating, you're trying to get your mind to focus on something specific. Now, in the Eastern meditation, their focus is nothingness or emptiness. They want to empty their mind and make themselves calm and peaceful. Now, that's not Christian meditation. Christian meditation isn't about emptying your mind. Christian meditation is about fixing your mind on the truth and the goodness of God. Christian meditation is about learning how to focus our minds. The psalm writers have a few examples of this. Psalm 119:15 says, I meditate on your precepts and consider your ways. So some psalm writers thinking and focusing his mind on God's laws, his precepts, the things he tells us we should and shouldn't do, and God's ways. He just ponders that, focuses on God. Psalm 143:5 says, I meditate on all your works and consider what your hands have done. Here's someone focusing on all the things God has done. Maybe it's stuff from history he's heard about. Probably and mixed in with that some stuff that he knows God has done in his life, right? He's focusing his mind on that. And so when we deal with the struggles of life, it's really good to focus our minds on God's, on what he's done, on his wonderful word and his law. We learn from God's law the things that are important to God and why. On focusing on his attributes, his love, his kindness, his power. So the challenge for today is to focus or meditate on God's truth and goodness. How do we get ourselves to do that? How can we set up, like if it was exercise, it was physical, how do we set up a program to do that? So how do we set up a mental program to do that? And I'm challenging you to do this specifically in the area of your stronghold, the thing that really just turns you negative, that makes you believe the wrong things. And so, since we are combating a stronghold, a thing in our mind that's like a fortress of deception, maybe many years old, this is probably going to, for it to work, it's going to need to be something that becomes a practice or a habit to help us. And so if your stronghold is active in feeding your mind lies, you should consider making it a daily thing. The next step, I put daily and I put it regularly because I wasn't sure. I didn't want People say, oh, there's no way I'll do it regularly or daily, so I'll just do it regularly. But daily is the best. So here's the pattern. Here's the way we meditate on God. First, we write it, we think it, we say it, and we keep doing that until we believe it. So that's it. So I'm going to find this truth that demolishes the stronghold, and I'm going to write it down. I'm going to think on it. I'm going to say it. There's something about speaking things out loud that really helps us. And I'm going to make that my pattern until my mind is renewed, until God's truth is stronger than this lie I've been believing. And so just like physical training, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort. You're going to have good days and bad days, right? But just like physical training, anything you do here will be of benefit, right? Anything we do. But we want to do as much as we can. So I want you to know this isn't a formula. This isn't a hack. This isn't a cheat. It's training your mind. And most people that tell you about changing things physically, you can do all sorts of crazy diets and do this thing in 30 days. The best way is just make it a lifestyle, make it a habit. And so we want to focus our mind on the truth of God to combat against the stronghold in our lives. This is sort of our spiritual weapon that God has given us. Truth wins. Jesus said, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And so it worked for the psalm writers in the past, and it still works today, because your life will always move in the direction of your strongest thoughts. And so if you change your thoughts and make them about the goodness of God and all he's done for you and all he wants to do, it's going to overcome these other things. It's better than saying, I'm just going to try not to be negative, right? Because let's try not to be something bad. You got to replace it with something good. That's what works. And because most of life's battles are won or lost in the mind. So it's not a one and done. For this to really work, it's got to be a habit we develop. But if you do it all the time, if you do it every day, if you make this a practice, you will change your focus, and God will begin to renew your mind, and your thinking will change. That's the heart of the message. So the final point today, number 2, if you don't control what you think, you'll never control what you do. It begins in the mind. And so I know this sounds really hard, just like physical training can sound hard. It requires discipline, implementing change, those things that we really don't want to have to do. But when we do it, God will use this mental focus, this meditation, to transform our lives. It's interesting how things that change in your mind can really work in your life. Karen and I have this tiny little duplex, and I have we have this tiny table with 2 chairs at it. And I have this habit of when I get out of my chair, I don't push it in, and the place is so small. And Karen will have to walk through, and my chair is, carelessly in the way. And so I said, well, why don't we switch places? Because where your chair is, it can be left out, and it doesn't block anything. And I didn't think she'd do it. She said, okay. It was almost like those old sitcoms where the husband and wife think that they have the hard job and their spouse doesn't, so they switch roles. Well, we just switch seats. And I got to tell you, just that change has really messed with me, because I don't know if you have a regular place at your table, but mine changed. It's now the other one. And I thought, oh, Karen will get tired of this quicker than I am because she's such a creature of habit. Well, she didn't. So we did this like a few weeks ago. We're still doing it. And so I still go to set my stuff at that's not my place anymore. It's over here. But it's amazing, the power of your mind. And when it comes to I don't know, what made me think of that, but it's a thing where you think in your mind you can't do it. It's just going to be too much. But it's amazing what we can do. And so I'm still hoping to switch back to my original spot. But if I don't, They're the same. It doesn't really matter. And it's good to share. But it's a test in mental fortitude, the power of the ability to change. So the challenge today, name your stronghold. And I touched on that briefly today. I touched on it a lot last week. If you missed, you can check it out. But and then identify the truth that demolishes that stronghold. What is God's truth that particularly fights against that? And then we want to focus on it. We want to meditate. We want to think on it. And I recommend writing it down. Someplace you're going to see. Maybe put it on the mirror in the bathroom. Maybe put it on your dresser. Like I have these pictures on my dresser of my bishop, my superintendent, my district leader. And I see them every morning, and I try to remember to pray when I see them. So it's a reminder. Maybe for you put it on the dashboard of your car, or put it somewhere at work, and somewhere where you'll see this truth. And then we want to think on it, and we want to speak it out loud, and make this become a regular thing as God slowly renews our mind. That's the message today. And of course, the next steps are tied to those. I want to shift to those now. They're in your message notes, also on the back of your Connect cards. And the first one is the one I've been talking about. Name my stronghold and the truth that demolishes it. What are the things that you're combating in your mind? And what is the truth of God that tears down that stronghold? Second, commit to focus on daily or regularly on God's truth so we can renew my mind. If you can every day recite your verse, look at it, think on it, it could make a huge difference. It will begin to renew your mind. God's truth will begin to be the dominant voice. The third one is based on that Philippians 4:8. It says, I'm going to focus my thoughts on things that are true, pure, excellent, praiseworthy, all that. Maybe for some of us, the stronghold or the thing we're combating is just the negativity around us. And you know what? I'm going to make a next step shift and be focused on I'm going to find the good. I'm going to find that Tucker dog in every story that's out there so that I can focus on the good. And then the last attend the rest of the series. We have 2 more weeks coming up in August. I've been finding this series very enjoyable and challenging to myself. The great news is it's something any of us can do. And it's something we all should do that can help us. It'll really help our lives. So I want to pray for you as you consider and take these next steps. And I know that the Lord is going to want to help us as we work with our thinking and renewing our minds. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for the power of your word, the idea of renewing our mind by replacing the negative, the lies with your truth. But we know, Lord, it's going to take some discipline from us to make it a regular thing, or even just a start. So we pray you'd help us, show us this truth that demolishes these strongholds, and that we could make a commitment to train and change our thinking. We ask for your help in this in Jesus' name. Amen.